Okay, I'll get to that after. So I think that sort of explains a lot about how I can know so many of the INs. Now, what I like about them, that each of these distinct types, what they share that I just love is, as mentioned, ENFP, I'm very typical this way. We love novelty and we love mental stimulation. We love to be stimulated, but particularly mentally, I think that's a big difference. I'm one of the most boring people you could ever imagine in terms of sort of physical adventure. Like I've never been on a roller coaster and I don't care. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like I'm like, I'd rather think about hang gliding than go hang gliding probably. And my imagination is so vivid that I just don't feel the need to actually have a lot of concrete experience. Most of the time I would rather be reading a book or using my imagination or talking to someone who has done these experiences and getting all kinds of secondhand information. I often feel like what I really want to do is to, like a mission in life, is to try and see the world through as many different eyes as possible. That's what really, that's a big thing I live for. It's something that I love to do. So, all right, back to the INs. Now, one thing that they seem to have in common, again, this is a huge generalization. I am not saying that all IN types are like it. People who identify with the IN types are like this, but it has been my experience, my extensive social experience, that a disproportionate number of the INs are really freaking smart, really smart. And what I think is going on there, I've sort of thought about it a lot, and I think this is just a theory I have. I don't know. I don't know if other people have had this theory or if it's true, but I think that it doesn't seem so surprising to me that so many of them are so very bright when you consider the marriage in these types of this sort of general introversion, their dominant functions being introverted, and which means that they not only can tolerate spending a great deal of time alone, they love their own company. And they need just their own company, for a certain amount of time, a substantial amount of time per day. They need quiet, they need solitude, they need privacy. And it means that with that sort of those temperamental leanings, it means that they can really, that which interests them, and again, what interests them could be very complex and very out there because they're very creative thinking types. So what I think is typical of each of the INs is that they will tend to have, certain areas. Every single IN I know has at least like 1 to 3 areas of specialty. Something that they're really passionate about and they're really interested in. And for those specialties, they go so deep into whatever that is. They tend to be really autodidact and very, they will go really far to learn everything that they can about whatever, particular subject or subjects, handful of subjects that they're really, really into, and they will become experts independently. Sometimes they'll go to school and get formal training or in some way or another for these interests. But I find that very often the INs, they don't need that at all. Like they will go and be very driven independently to really, and in doing so, they're exercising their brains, they're exercising the prefrontal cortex like crazy. So, I don't think it's so surprising that so many of them are really bright. So of course that's stimulating and fantastic. I love that. Then the fact that they're creative, they have novel ways of looking at things. They have innovative solutions as ideas for things. They just have very colorful minds, just wonderfully colorful minds that I feel it's a real privilege to have any access to. It's just a boon for me. It's wonderful. And then this fact that what each of them share too is that they all are very naturally very unconventional people deep down. And so something else I love is that they will I just thought of another thing too that they all share in common. All of them hate small talk. They hate it, and I hate it too. I can probably do it more than a lot of them, or I can do it more easily, but I hate it. And I actually have gone to great lengths in my life. Like I've really kind of forfeited certain opportunities, I think, or certain avenues because I just couldn't handle it. I can't stand to be bored. And, I also am so driven with my FI and second and auxiliary position in the NFP. I'm so driven for authenticity that I too find it awful, but not as awful as they do, but, pretty awful. So we agree on that. And I love that with these INs, they don't, I feel that with all of my IN friends and associates and lovers and relatives, I feel like I can jump into pretty much any subject at all they will entertain it. It doesn't mean that they're going to be as interested as me, or of course, or that they want to pursue it. But I mean, I really can bring up all kinds of things that a lot of other people would think are really weird, or irrelevant, or just way too out there for them to entertain. And for me, though, I find with the INs, I can bring up just about anything, anytime, and they will consider it, if not go way into it with me, and if not add like this huge body of interesting opinion, if they happen to have thought of it previously, I'll get to really see that. I'm trying to find, where did I lost my own, there we go. Okay. So there's that. Then, as for their specialized interests, another thing with ENFP that meshes well with a lot of these IN types, I think, is that we are being so curious and wide-ranging. Again, we're always, trying to cover a lot of ground in our lives. We tend to know a little bit about a great number of things, and so I can find myself, and again with my sort of native and developed sort of adaptability of mind, I can be interested in just about anything, and generally when I approach people, I'll very quickly try and figure out what they're interested in, and then I'll try and find the common thing we're interested in, and I will build on that conversationally. And so I can do that with the INs, and it's great. I also feel like one of the benefits for me of having so many IN associates is that because they are such specialists in the things that they care about, it means that I can go about my life being the kind of gadfly that I am, and just picking up this and that and snips and snaps of things. But if there's an IN in my network who and I'm presented with a problem I need to solve or whatever, I know that I can go to that person and ask them about the subject, and I'm pretty much guaranteed a really thoughtful, intelligent, considered, and just knowledgeable opinion on the subjects that they are experts in. So that's fantastic for me. Isn't that wonderful? What else? The other thing is that I think it's, as already mentioned, they're very deep people. All the NTs, all the NFs, all the INFs, all the INTs, they're very deep people. The NTs, particularly in a sort of book smart intellectual sense, I find. And they tend to have a lot of really arcane kind of intellectual knowledge, I find. Not all of them, but just a greater than usual number of them, I notice. That can be said about. And as for the and the other thing that I really like is that sorry, I'm filled with joy thinking of all the INs that I love and I think they're just all superheroes to me. I don't know how they do what they do. I can't imagine living the way that they do, and I find them just so exotic and interesting and stimulating. That's really it. So so the NTs tend to be, the INTs, they just tend to be really intellectual, and I just love that, and I admire the kinds of things that they know about. Something else I really like about my INT friends and associates is that as an ENFP, being this really kind of zany character and just really brash and impulsive, and I can kind of be counted upon to be socially inappropriate well, pretty much all the time, unless I'm really focusing on, reining it in, which I can sort of do. But I mean, the freak flag is always up there with me. I can't really, I've tried to hide it at times when I, would have suited my interests. And I didn't, I did a fair job. I did my best, but, it's kind of with the extroversion and the dominant intuition, the freakiness is just right out there. Anyway. Something that is with the INTs, I know that I just treasure is that they are so not apt to take things personally. So the fact that I may say, say some things and then go, oops, it doesn't bother them. Very often it just doesn't bother them at all. It's kind of hard to offend them in a way. And it also means that I can play more, like I can kind of play rough with them. Like I can tease them about their weird things or whatever, and they're just like, yeah, whatever, like they come right back at me with a hilarious zinger right back about, what I'm teasing them about, and they volley something right back to me, or they're just like, just totally don't care. And I find that amusing too, like that sort of, real independence of mind that the INTJs and the INTPs have. I mean, all the INs have that to a remarkable degree, but those guys, like, really, it's hard to touch them. You know what I mean? Like they're doing their thing and they've got their ideas, and yeah. INFPs do too. For example, they're very, married to their points of view, but, and very sort of decided and they have conviction about, their beliefs, but they are also they tend to be extremely emotionally sensitive. And so the rest of the world gets to them. I don't find that with the INTs that is so much the case. Again, I'm not saying they don't have lots of feelings and they don't hurt and they don't, and they experience a lot of social rejection too for being so unusual, and just also for, various things. That's another subject to go into. But, anyway, they just don't take stuff as personally as often, I find. And that's quite delightful for me in a way. Then as far as the INFs, there's just such a warmth there. And of course they're NFs like I am. So there's this really, I don't know, this like muffiny goodness there. Like, sorry, God, that's really gross, but there's just, all of the NFs, we're all really interested. We have a lot of, interest, and we tend to have a lot of talent just because we've developed those interests. We've actively developed those interests. So we love to talk about like kind of the cybernetics of sociality. And we love to talk about, just the inner workings of the mind and emotional stuff and sort of psychological things. And that's an endless source of interest for all of us. So that's wonderful. What's the other thing about that? There was something related to that. I just don't want to miss it. Okay, anyway, I'll move along. The other thing that I love about all the INs is because they're so, because they're introverts, there's so much that they're up to mentally that not only, first of all, there's so much sort of complex stuff that is going on with them so much of the time that would be hard to share with the rest of the world if they even wanted to. There's that. And then there's also the fact they have this limited social energy, that they have to really manage. They have to be really kind of conservationists about their own sort of social energy per day and their output with that. So what? So they're not obvious. They're not interested in the obvious. And they themselves are not obvious in a lot of things. They're very often they have quite an impassive demeanor unless, they're in a private or a small group situation with a bunch of people that they feel really comfortable with and they really like. And in that case, they might be totally indistinguishable from extroverts. But, in general, though, they're kind of more just, compared to me anyway. I guess a lot of people are very calm compared to me. But so they don't feel the need, unlike me, very unlike me. They're much more poker faced. They don't feel the need to share a whole lot of stuff all the time. If you want to ask them, they might tell you, but they're not going to just volunteer every thought that's going through their mind, unlike some people. And what this means is that something that I love about having them as friends, and is that I know that they will be having these. They'll be doling out at totally unpredictable times. They're going to be doling out to me these little surprises about their biographies or about things that they've thought about or that they've done. And again, as an ENFP who loves novelty and loves fun surprises, I can't. It's so great. It's so great. I don't know how many times it's been the case that I've been hanging out with one of my IN friends who I've known for decades, even, and then one day we'll just be walking along and they'll just mention casually. It'll just come up in what they're saying that they did such and such a thing that I have never heard of. They've never told me about it. I have no idea, and it's just so great, so I really enjoy that. Then the last sort of thing that they all have in common, and it's a relational thing with me, is there's this wonderful, sexy exoticism, I find. And I think that, and I know that there's theory about that too. And I have found that theory is completely sound in my extensive social experience. It's to the point where it's almost like I don't even know if I can be attracted, like in a sexy way, can be attracted to other extroverts. I mean, it happens once in a while, but I find there's a real pull with these creative thinking introverts and me, and quite often it's mutual, whether that be a platonic or otherwise. We like each other's company. We're kind of drawn to one another, and there really is a sort of, to me, there's a real, and I think it's mutual too, to a certain extent, but particularly from me to them, there's a fascination. There's a real, I look at you guys and I'm just marveling at you. I'm like, how do they do what they do? How do they arrive at the things that they do mentally? And I'm just often very impressed and intrigued, and I think it's really neat. So now let's see, where are we? Oh, there are also some logistical reasons, I think, why I tend to like so many IN people. One of them, so this has to do with that was all about mental compatibility. This is about sort of more, I guess you could say, logistical, concrete, circumstantial kind of stuff. And it relates to what I just said. They give me a place to rest. If I spend time with them, it's obviously I'm so cranked up. I'm like, that's my baseline. My baseline is like someone who's done 15 lines of coke, as you can see. And that's sort of like that's kind of the normal. And I have to try and tone it down. But, what I find is with my fellow extroverted friends who are almost entirely also creative thinking ones, ENTJ, ENFP, ENFJ, so on. We have a wonderful time too. We have a fantastic time together. But what happens is there's so much huge extrovert like me getting together with even a moderate extrovert. There's just so much energy created that we almost don't even know what to do with ourselves. And if in a sort of sexy or romantic situation, it's like somebody would have to shut up so we can go to bed, someone has to shut up at some point. And I find with a fellow extrovert, we're more likely to just be up all night. We're going to have such a fun time, and we'll be sort of just getting each other so wound up that, it's maybe we just can't even get to the sexy stuff most of the time. But with the INs, I mean, I don't know if I couldn't say that they ground me, but they do, too big a job, really, like anyone. But they do, the fact that they're such homebodies and that they just tend to have they tend to really love a simple good time. And so do I. I really prefer, there's no better time to me than sitting on a couch with someone interesting, listening to some nice music. Really, for me, that is the best time, other than reading or there are solitary things that I like to do. But as far as sociality goes, I so do not need to be where the action is. I so don't need to be in environments that are loud and where you can't really converse. I kind of hate that. I either like to be in a calm environment, having a good conversation, a meaty, interesting conversation with a smart interesting person who has weird ideas. To me, that is a really good time. And that's where the two of us can, the INs and me can really meet and kind of agree, because most of them would rather do that than like go out to a club or go out, they don't need to be in a crowd. They don't need to feel like, and they really don't, like, they're so unusual, and they usually have quite an identity about being so, they've been told they're freaks all their lives. They've been told they're such weirdos, and they're used to most people not getting them at all. And they also just prefer their own company a lot of the time. I've heard so many of my IN friends say, and it's so funny because this has come up so many times spontaneously, but, in their each respective different ways, they've said to me, I don't like most people, and they don't say very often, they're saying it like it's just a fact. They're not being mean. They're not trying to insult anybody. They're just like, most of the time, I would really prefer to be doing my own solitary pursuits than, spending time with people. And certainly if those people are phony, or if they're superficial, or they're interested in small talky stuff, like it's just so draining for me. It's so draining, and it's a waste of time, and I don't like it. So they're pretty happy to do sort of simple things together, go for a walk in the woods, or, just hang out, have a meal, have a glass of wine, talk about whatever we can think of. And when you get two creative thinking people together, we can think of a lot of, the conversational topics can be all over the place. And we both love, we tend to love that, all of us. So, the other thing is that they're, because those types are each of those types are so much about sort of quality of interaction with others. They really value that. I find that they're not hung up at all, and they're also just natively really unconventional people. So they're not hung up at all on, we are these kind of friends, so therefore we need to see each other on this kind of a schedule. Like, we're best friends, so we need to talk to each other every other day, and we need to. They don't have those ideas, I find, so far anyway. Like, they're not beholden to conventional notions of politesse and how you're supposed to do things. Like, they don't give a shit about how you're supposed to do things. Like, they'll come up with their own, what they think works best for them, and they're going to do that if it's at all possible. So that's pretty great. Very flexible. The J's, of course, they're more scheduled, and if you say that something's going to happen in a certain way at a certain time, they want it to happen that way. But they're pretty flexible about setting up when, and they'll never, I've never had any of them fault me for, being a long time in between visits. They don't take that personally. They may not even notice, you know what I mean? They're so busy doing their own things that they're not keeping track of that. They just want that, just like I do, they just want that when we do get together, that it's like a real conversation. That's what they want, that's much more important than that we do it really often, or that we do it in a certain way. So that's really mutually agreeable. It's also the case too, because they don't like most people. Like a lot of the INs report this. They don't like, again, they have a limited amount of energy for interaction with other people. And it's also when you get on in life and you grow up and you get into my age, into middle age, they've got their things to do. And so that just limits things even further, how much energy and how much time they have in their schedules to socialize. And, because they just don't need as many people, they don't need so much social interaction. It also means that I can be I can be really spontaneous and all over the place, and I can just not drop in on them. Like, again, I would never actually go and drop in on any of them. They would hate that. It would be disturbing and stressful for them. But I mean, like, go over, just show up unannounced someplace where they're going to be. But I mean, I can call them up just out of the blue and say, how about Wednesday? You want to get together Wednesday? And they're like, yeah, sure. That's totally fine. And they are more, they're quite available, because they're not, how do I put it? Unlike extroverts like me, unlike my other, I have many ENFP friends. And unlike the INFPs, they are not likely to have their social calendar totally booked up, because they just wouldn't do that. They don't want to do that, even if they could do that. And so it means that it's quite easy to get together with them, I